So in the last video we talked about the general tab, and what I've been doing is showing you folks how I'm going through and configuring my Nina setup in hopes that it will help you in configuring your Nina setup. So the next tab that we're going to be visiting is going to be the imaging tab. We're jumping all the way down to the imaging tab because we don't have equipment set up, and you really need equipment set up so that I can go in and properly configure the equipment tab and the autofocus tab and the dome tab. But the next tab that we can really do something in is going to be the imaging tab. The imaging tab basically has all of your parameters that you're going to be using for your images, as well as a bunch of miscellaneous that are on this side. On the right side here, you've got Meridian flip settings, image options, and then sequence, and then layout. So the first thing is over here in the file settings is to pick which file format you want to save your frames or your subs or your images out at. So if you're using a DSLR or a mirrorless and not a dedicated astro camera, what you save your image as doesn't really matter. But if you're using dedicated astro cameras like I'm using, then you have three choices. You have a choice of a TIFF, a FITS, or XISF. If you're going to be stacking your images in PixInsight, I would be doing XISF. I'm not using PixInsight. I use Astro Pixel Processor for my stacking, and then I bring everything into PixInsight. So for me, the option is going to be FITS, because FITS is still a universal file type that can be read by most any kind of application. I would stay away from TIFF because the headers for TIFF files do not contain fields for astrophotography information, and so I would kind of stay away from a TIFF file format. I would either choose either a FITS or an XISF. I do not use file encryption or file compression, and that's what this next setting is for, the CFITS.io. It basically allows you to compress your FITS files. So I always kind of stay away from compression, but your mileage may vary. You may decide that you want to implement this. If I was to implement this, just make sure that your native application that you're going to be using for stacking can read a compressed FITS file. Okay, next thing is image path or image file path. Like, where do you want all these images to go? Where do you want them to be stored? I happen to have two drives on my mini PC. One is a C drive, one is a D drive, and I call my D drive images, and then I created another folder on that called images. So boom, there we go. So everything that Nina is going to save out, it's going to save out to this directory if it is an image, if it's a sub, or if it's a frame, or whatever lingo you want to use for it, it's going to save it out here. This next section here is where you construct your naming convention. What do you want to name your file? How do you want your file named? Do you want to create additional directories based upon different parameters? And this is where you can basically design how you want to name your files, and it's pretty neat. And you'll see here that there's a little drop down caret here, so you can also design flats and darks and biases, and you can have a pattern view here. I'm just going to show you guys just the basic file image pattern that I want to basically develop. So how you develop this is you have a list of parameters down here, or variables. You can call them variables. Basically, you got time variables, camera variables, image variables, filter wheel variables, focuser variables, guider variables, rotator, weather, telescope. So you can use these items here. They begin with $2 signs, they end with $2 signs, and you can use these to create, if you will, a structure for your file naming conventions. So for instance, I want to start off my files to be saved out to a directory which tells me what the target is. So to do that, I can come down here to the image, and I can see that there is a variable here, or a parameter if you wish, called $$ target name $$. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type that, target name $$. And what you will see is down here in the pattern preview, it will show you what that looks like. And it just uses fake data. So in this case, it's M33. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the backspace because I want to create another folder within that target folder. And that folder is going to be the date. And what I use is I use this date minus 12. Because what it does is it backs everything up by 12 hours because, as you well know, when we photograph, we cross over from one day to the next day, and instead of having two directories, because at midnight your next images come in and they're now into a new directory, it keeps everything in one directory. And it just basically backs things up by 12 hours, so that way, even though you cross over into the new day, it all keeps it in one folder for you. So that's going to be boom, boom, $$, and that is going to be date minus 12 $. And you can see what it looks like here. Okay, and then I'm going to do another backslash because I'm going to create yet another directory underneath this date. And what that directory is going to be, it's going to be what kind of sub is this? Is this a bias frame? Is it a light frame? Is it a flat frame? Is it a dark? Is it a snapshot? What is it? And that's down here underneath image on image type. So we're going to go and I segregate my image types out into directories because it just makes it so much easier when you actually go to process them, because they're all kind of together underneath their types. So you're not mixing light frames with darks and flats, but rather flats are all in one directory, your dark or dark flats are all in another directory, and your lights are in their own directory. Just makes life a little easier. So we're going to go here with image type. Image type. And you can see there that it's light. So far, all I've done is create a directory structure. So it's going to be the target name, which it gets off of the advanced sequencer or the legacy sequencer. And then it's got the date that you're doing your shooting, and then what kind of sub it is it a light, and so forth and so forth. And we're going to do another backslash. And I think that we are done now with our directory. So now we're going to move into actually naming the file. And the first thing that I want to do in naming my file is I want to know what filter I'm shooting with. So I'm going to go $$ filter, $$. If I could spell, it would be great. There we go. So in this case, it's L for luminance, and we'll go underscore. So I know that at least in this setup here, I've got M33 directory, which brings you to the date directory, which brings you to the light directory, which now brings you to luminance filter for the actual name. The next one that I'm going to do is going to be RMS. It needs to be capitalized, RMS. There we go. And you can see that right down here in Guider. You got RMS, which is root mean square error of guiding. So during the exposure in pixels, or you can do RMS arc seconds, which is exposure in arc seconds. And I generally tend to do arc seconds. So arc sec. There we go. So now I capture that as part of my naming convention because I use 3 pieces of information to help me cull out my frames. The first piece of information is what the RMS is. The next one is HFR, and then the following one is how many stars did Nina detect in that particular frame. And I use those as a quick way to help me cull out images that I don't need to waste my time looking at. And so the first of that is RMS arc seconds. And you can see here you can put in letters or any kind of verbiage you want, and that's part of the naming convention. And so I got 0.65, and I have it as RMS so that I know that it's RMS. My next thing is going to be the HFR. I want to know what the HFR is. HFR, $, in space, and you're right, I'm going to type in HFR so I know that it's HFR. And you can see how I'm constructing this thing, so I'm just going to go ahead and just finish constructing the rest of this the way that I want to construct it. So the next one is going to be star count. So $, star count, $. And that's going to be stars. So that way I can quickly look and say, HFR on this is pretty bad. I must be shooting with an SCT. I don't know. Just all right. Anyways, so then we come to temp, and for temp you come here to the camera, and you can do temperature in 2 different ways here. You can do what the actual sensor temperature is, or you can do what the temperature set point is. I find that either one works just fine, and so I generally tend to do sensor temp, and then I follow that with a capital C to let me know that that's temperature reading. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to identify what camera I'm shooting with. So it's going to be $, camera, $. And then I'm going to also identify what telescope I am shooting with. And the reason why I do all this is because at the end of the night, all of my files get copied over to my file server, and so they're all sitting on my workstation in my office. And so I'll get different subs from different targets, and a year from now, if I can look and say, oh, okay, I shot that with my mono camera on that particular telescope, when I look at those subs, it just is nice to know rather than having to go look up in notes like, what did I shoot with that night? Just makes it easier. Now you can add other things in here like rotator angles, focuser position, focuser temp, what your binning is. I don't bin, I just leave everything native. I know what my gain is and I know what my offset is because each camera is set up, so it's pretty much static. So those things I don't generally put into my names, but you could very easily put into your names. The only other thing that I put in at this point in time is the date time. So I'm going to go $, and we're going to go date time. That just tells me when that particular image was shot. And what's nice about it is that it just gives me, it's not the date minus, but it gives me what the actual time when that image was taken, which is different than up here where I used date minus 12. And so that's my naming convention. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. Now quickly over here to this side here, just quickly because I'm running out of time here. Here's your Meridian flip settings, and again, how many minutes, what's the max, or how many minutes after the Meridian do you want to flip, and you can change this. You can say 0 minutes or 3 minutes or 2 minutes or 10 minutes. It all depends upon your mount and your telescope, and that's really going to be up to you guys. You guys need to make that decision based upon whether or not what your safety limits are set at. All that gets to play in here. For me, I just take the default settings because they work for my setup. So your mileage may vary. So you got minutes after Meridian, you've got max minutes after Meridian, so don't go more than 10 minutes and within 10 minutes after the Meridian. And part of this right here is if you're in the middle of taking a sub, you kind of want to finish the sub up before you initiate a Meridian flip. Use telescope side of the Pier so that Nina will query the telescope to find out what side of the Pier it thinks it's on. And then, of course, we want to recenter after the flip, and then the time to settle after the scope has flipped. How long do you want it to wait before it does anything? 30 seconds. Do you want it to pause before the Meridian? You can have it pause and wait. So you can set that here, and again, all that's depending on your safety limits on your mount, and everybody's mounts are going to be different, so you're going to have to just figure that piece out. Autofocus after the flip, then rotate image after flip. This is if you want to not see that you've done a flip but your image looks the same all throughout the night. I leave mine off so I can tell, yep, I did a successful Meridian flip if I go take a look at it. Here's some image options. Annotate your image. If you say yes, then what it will do is it will show when you go to your image tab here and you see the actual image, there will be a little yellow number beside each star, and that's the HFR for that particular star. So it gets kind of busy, so I generally keep it off, and I use the Hocus Focus plugin, and what that does is that will give me what the HFR is, and you can actually turn this on in the imaging tab itself. If you want to know what the HFR of all your various stars are, you can click it on there and then click it off. So I just leave it off because I don't need to see all that stuff. Debayer the image. That's especially true for previews on color cameras. Debayer HFR. This will help in the calculation of the HFR metric if you have a color camera. And then unlink stretch. Again, if you're using a color camera, it will stretch each channel separately, the red, green, blue, and it will stretch those separately. And it says here that it's especially good to hide the sky background and to enhance autofocus and plate solving reliability, especially in light polluted areas. So because I might run a color camera on this scope, I'm just going to leave those on. It doesn't matter if you leave them on or if it's mono camera. It doesn't really matter. It only really applies if you have a color camera. Advanced settings, these are default and I pretty much stick with these. The only one that I change is the noise reduction. I'll change that to normal. Noise reduction just helps it to not see noise as a possible star, and then you want it to detect stars, so you have star sensitivity up, but I leave the stretch factor and the black clipping alone. And then sequence, here's where you want all your files saved out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a separate folder because I don't like things all together on my C drive, and I'm going to create a new folder out here, and it's going to be called Nina. And that's going to be the folder that I'm going to save these things out. So this is the default folder for sequence files. So these are the files in your advanced sequencer. Where do you want those things to be saved? New folder, there we go. Getting ahead of myself. And now I can go ahead and select that folder. So there we are, Nina sequences. Here's for sequence templates. So I'm going to again move that out here to Nina, and I got sequences, and I'm going to create a folder, templates. I'm going to copy that and come out here and new folder, templates. Boom, there we go. Okay, these next two here, the legacy sequence template and the startup sequence template, there are no templates created just yet for those, so I'm just going to leave those blank for right now because they want a specific file. In this case, I want an XML file, and in this case, I want a JSON file. So when we get into the sequencer piece of this, we'll go ahead and we'll create those, and then you can come back here and you can point to them. Is basically what this is. And then the sequencer targets folder, I am going to put that folder over here on D, Nina, and I'm going to create a new folder called targets. So new folder, targets. Boom. And there we go. And what this folder here is for is when you are in your Sky Atlas and then you go into your framing wizard and you save your targets out, they'll get stored out here so that you can reuse those targets. And then collapse sequence templates, by default, I like to leave them all open so I can see what's in them. But if you just want the top headers, you can. And when we get into the advanced sequencer, you'll see what that looks like. And disable legacy sequencer, because we're going to quickly go over that in a future video. I'll go ahead and leave that on. And then here again, you can back up your layout, how everything is all configured, how everything's set. You can restore from a backup file, or you can reset, which basically brings everything, it basically blanks out everything that you've done and sets it to the default of the fresh installed. So in this case here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say I'm going to back it up, and I'm going to back it up in Nina, and it's just going to be doc backup doc config dot config. Okay, and there we go. So my imaging tab layout is now backed up. So my naming convention, if for some reason I have to reinstall Nina or something goes wrong, I can at least bring all that back, as well as all my Meridian flip settings and all that. So next week, we will talk about plate solving and setting that up, and there's a few things there that you're going to want to keep track of in plate solving, and there's some places that we're going to have to go and explore. So I'll save that for next week. So if you found any of this to be useful, helpful, interesting, or whatever, please go ahead and hit the like button down below, and if you feel so inclined, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell, and when I put out more content about Nina, you'll be alerted to it. So until next time, clear skies and happy guiding.